you try and take a 3-week hiatus to let some, certain things just blow over. Look, just on that, it's all looking pretty good at the moment. There's been no ramifications, so hopefully it's situation normal when I actually get back to my channel full time. But I'm just going to take a break from my hiatus to just cover this story. Now, it's about Zara Zelenak that apparently got killed in the London Bridge terror attack at the Borough Markets. And she went missing for like 3 or 4 days, and I'd already done a video on, what a mystery that was. Well, there's bits of an interview that I picked up on the Today Show and also in this radio clip that I'm about to show that just has some puzzling information. But just before I get to that, we'll just have a quick look at the story at the time. So this was from 2017. This is about 2 days after the attack.
There are grave concerns for a Brisbane woman who's been missing in London since the terror attack. It's believed Zara Zelenak was separated from her friends in the chaos.
Now, that video was part of this story in the Gold Coast Bulletin, and there it is, June the 6th, about 48 hours after the attack. And it's got there a Gold Coast father is desperately waiting for news of his daughter. And I've also highlighted down there the authorities have not been able to shed any light on her whereabouts. So at this stage, he hasn't heard from her, and the authorities, they haven't been able to shed any light. Whereas they had shed light on Kirsty Bowden, which was the mystery that I couldn't work out in my first video that I did on Zara. Well, this week, Mark Wallace, which was the stepfather at the time, and Zara's mother, well, they've been on radio and on media because there's an inquest into this, 2 years later, into this London Bridge and Borough Market attack.
Tomorrow in London, an inquest into the London Bridge Borough Markets terror attack of June 2017 will get underway. Brisbane couple Mark and Julie Wallace spent 4 agonising days waiting to find out what happened to their daughter, Zara Zelenak.
Okay, so they've repeated the fact that they didn't know what was going on, just as what was reported at the time. But listen to what they say later on in the interview.
Last year, riding our bikes from Zara's place of death at Borough Markets, and then...
Okay, well, that's very, very interesting, because he's now established that her place of death was at Borough Markets. So how on earth did she go missing for 4 days if the Borough Markets was the scene of police tape and people everywhere? How wasn't she found for 4 days? So that's very interesting. So you might think maybe she was killed and someone dragged her off and they didn't find her for 4 days. Well, it gets even much more interesting than that.
There were 2 police officers that tried for approximately 10 minutes to resuscitate Zara. It was something that we understand that Zara was killed instantly, but they, in their efforts, tried for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So obviously what he's saying there totally contradicts the story at the time, which is the authorities had not been able to shed any lights on her whereabouts, whereas in fact they could, because the police, who are the authorities, were there a minute and they knew that she was dead because they tried for 10 minutes to try and to revive her. So they could shed light. Now, they shed light on Kirsty Bowden, on the other victims, but why didn't the authorities 2 days later, this is 2 days, didn't they shed light on the whereabouts of Zara Zelenak? Well, this Australian story on the ABC about Zara Zelenak has some very interesting information in regards to the timeline, which I think really helps paint the picture of what actually happened. So in this story, they mentioned that Zara had the night off and was at a restaurant at London Bridge, right on the spot. But the exact same time, that was Saturday night, so Sunday morning, Mark and Julia having breakfast back here in Australia. So in the main paragraph there, it says, when news broke of the third attack, and they're talking about the London Bridge attack this time, a family member, Heather, happens to be a nan, tried to contact her, but Sarah didn't respond. So at this point in time, they haven't got a response from Sarah. And her mother, Julie, tries to call and it's unanswered. And then later that night, the family, who she was an au pair for, they ring them up and say that she hadn't come home. And it's all a bit unusual. And the dad starts to ring around all the hospitals. And look, they're not giving away any information, but that would kind of make sense because he's ringing from another country. They don't really know who he is. So I can understand him not giving out any information. But so that's where we're at this stage. So the next day, which is only 24 hours after the supposed attack, the Australian Federal Police turn up. At the same time, the media began camping out the couple's front lawn. Why would the media be camping out the front of the couple's lawn? What do they know? Now, they've tried to find information, and they can't get anything, but the media would only camp there if they had known or were expected to report on something that was known, which is the most important thing. That's the only reason they would be camping there. Now, we know at this stage that the cops had tried to revive Sarah at the scene, and they know she's dead. Yet, for some reason, the AFP have turned up, and they say Mark and Julie were told by the AFP that Sarah was in the area of the Borough Market when the attack took place, and that she was officially listed as missing. Beyond that, they had no other news. So presumably, for some reason, their counterparts over in London, the London police, decide they're just going to lie. They're going to lie and say she's missing. What, the London cops are going to lie to the Australian Federal Police? Well, that's what it appears, as though that's what's happened. Okay, so from this, it says Julie was interviewed for physical features and they were collecting DNA. Sounds to me like the delay was they were trying to identify who Sarah was. I'll just sort of stop and just make mention now. This is the ABC. And the ABC, they are owned by the government, which is owned by the same people that run all these operations that own the mainstream media. Now, this story was in August 2018, more than a year after. So what they're trying to do is to try and explain why there was this 4-day delay, and they're throwing in all this sort of information that even when they try and explain it, still has lots of holes in it. But that's the purpose of this story. And with the story comes a lot of garbage that doesn't make any sense, such as this. Things began to escalate with a knock at the door at midnight. The AFP returned to say that London police had located Sarah's passport, but were unable to confirm anything more. Okay, well, that's a bit odd. So at this point in time, the cops have been there a couple of times. She's been missing. Now we know, according to what he said now, that the authorities knew she was dead. But the AFP either didn't know or didn't relay it to her. Here's where it gets really ridiculous. So this bullshit story designed to try and fill in the gaps for that 4 days now has them, they're on a plane 3 days after the attack, still not knowing whether their daughter was alive or dead. So you might be thinking, the AFP knew, but they thought, the London police can let her know. Although, protocol would be, they would be told as soon as possible. Why put them through the agony of not knowing? The Australian Federal Police would know, or they should know, but they don't say. But that sort of gets ruled out by the next paragraph. So you would think the person that then told them, gave them that information, that would be the key as to why it was 4 days. But look at this paragraph. They received a message when they came into land that confirmed their worst fears. What, not in person? They're on a plane, they got a message? What, a text message? From who? They don't say. Because that kind of information could then be traced back as to why, when the authorities, according to what he said before, they tried to resuscitate her, knew on the very night that she was dead. They had a passport and everything. But they didn't. So for some reason, these people couldn't find out until they were on a plane coming in. So I'll just come back to this part in the Australian story, supposing, trying to cover it up. And, it's a year later, as I said, they're trying to roll back this, and explain this 4-day delay, which really can't be explained. And ultimately now he's come out and said that the police were there and she died on the spot. And there's no explanation for how it was 4 days that the authorities didn't know, and for how they didn't know until they were flying in. But once this inquest gets underway, that delay is going to be wiped from the record, and they're going to say, oh yeah, it's going to be admitted that they didn't know for 4 days. But that's very telling, because this part here where it says the media began camping on the front lawn, now they only camp somewhere, so that'd be all media, if there's something to report. Now what was meant to have been reported, the AFP were meant to have gone there, told the family that, they got there at the same time, someone in the AFP warned the media, and that their daughter was dead, and they were meant to come out and do a media statement. That's what they were there for. But that didn't happen. Now, why didn't that happen? That was the plan, 100% that was the plan. So why didn't it go according to plan? Now, the only explanation I can come up with around this Zara thing is that it's a Sisto situation. Now, Sisto was elderly and he died of natural causes, but they incorporated his death into the attack in Burke Street. I think that's what they've done with this girl. I believe that she's dead, but not part of this, attack at all. It's all completely fake. But they, now she's young, of course, so I could only guess that she's either been in a car accident or some kind of accident, and I think she's been on life support. So they were going to time switching off the life support with this attack. So that's why they had like I said a second ago, they had the media out. There was all time for the AFP to be there and the teary announcement. But I think they pulled her off life support and she didn't die. And therefore they couldn't, get her body to where the other bodies were. Because they announced all the other ones pretty well straight away, but they had a delay in this one. So they couldn't get her body, or maybe she died elsewhere and they were transferring her to, where they needed to be to incorporate her into this attack. But there was a delay in that part of their hoax. Hence it put them back. So that, like I said, that's the only explanation I've got. So, but there's definitely what they're trying to do now is, because look, all that stuff about giving CPR for 10 minutes, that's all just totally, we know that's untrue. But they're trying to whitewash this fact that there was a delay. And when this commission goes ahead, you can guarantee they won't be talking about how there was a delay in announcing her death or that transfer of information. They're going to say that, oh yeah, she died and they gave her all the help she could, and the parents are grateful for it. So that's what they're trying to do. So anyway, let's just look at how they've been rewarded. So we'll just finish off with their payday for participating in this hoax. And here it is, SARS Sanctuary. Now, this was promoted on Chris Smith's program, and it was also on the Today Show, and I dare say on other media outlets as well. They all get in on it, and they help them to collect their payment for participating in the hoax. And this is the way they do it. So it's a charity, it's a not-for-profit, it's worldwide. They're doing bike rides and really promoting, donations to this charity. So what it really means is they'll be directors of it and they'll never have to work again. And, how many people they support, who knows? There's the ABN number. And there's a charity registered in the United Kingdom. So there you go. They don't actually, oh yeah, there we go. Was killed in the London Bridge and Borough terror attack. Sarah taught, all this sort of stuff. But this is their payday. So just thought I'd finish off with that. All right, that's it for this one.